Hello everyone, it's Mr. Wyman. I'm getting ready to read for you today an article called Homemade Bread. Before I do, I want to talk a little bit about test-taking strategies. Before reading a text like this, and this is the entire text, okay? It's a short article of 4 paragraphs. If there's going to be comprehension questions that you're to answer after having read a text, I recommend you practice this strategy. You first take a look at the questions before reading the text, and it really works out best if you're using paper, right? Because what you could do, and what I recommend, is I'm making space on my table here because I'm imagining having a paper test and the article being actually printed out on paper. What I would do is I would read the questions first, and I'm going to go through and read these questions ahead of reading the text for you. Because when you're reading the text, you should stop when you come to what you perceive as the answer of one of the questions. Even mark it with your pencil or highlight in the text where the answer to a question could be found. In the past, I've told students to write the number of a question next to where it is. So basically, you're going to jump back and forth between the questions and the text. This is a great practice for finding the best answer for a question. And this is the trick. Do not read the answers to the questions until after reading the actual text. The reason is you want to find what you think will answer the question first, highlight it, mark it with a pencil, then go back, and when you read the questions, see if any of the actual answers match what you found as what you think is the answer. The answer that's the closest to what you found, that's probably your best bet, the best answer to choose. If none of them match, then you'll have to read the text very, very carefully and see if you can interpret what the person who made the question was thinking and where the answer could come from. You might have to reread a few times, and that's a great reading strategy too for comprehension and answering test questions. All right, so for homemade bread, I just made this quiz this morning, and let's take a look at some of the questions before reading the text. Why does the author bake his own bread? That's something to consider as you're reading the article. Notice I'm not reading the answers at all. I'm skipping right to the next question. What effect does the yeast have on the bread? So this would be a cause and effect question. So I'm going to be looking for the word yeast. This is another, and when you're reading the questions before the text, you may even want to circle or highlight key words within the question. So now I'm going to be looking for the word yeast when I'm reading the article. What does kneading do? You don't pronounce the K in this word, kneading. So you might want to circle kneading or highlight it. You're going to be looking for that in the text. That was just an image of kneading, actually. Which of the following sentences uses the word mix in the same way as this sample sentence? I'm going to read the sample sentence so that I know what to look for when I'm in the text. But this particular type of question, you could actually answer without having read the article at all, because this is the text from the article you're going to use to answer this question. The next step is to mix everything until it is thick dough. Mix everything. What clue helped you decide the use of mix in the previous question? Okay. Again, that doesn't really have to do with the text, but it's still good to know what to expect when it comes time to take this quiz. Why does the author include the following sentence? In a moment, I will explain why this ingredient is so special. So I'm going to look for that in the text. What is the main idea of the passage? You always want to consider that when reading an article. So I would probably highlight main idea. In addition to the spelling, how else can you tell that the homophone need from this passage does not mean to really, really want or desire something, to need something spelled like that? Here's the text from the passage. The next step is to mix everything until it is thick dough. Then I push and prod the dough, folding and pounding it. This is called kneading, and it helps the dough rise. After I finish kneading, I let the dough sit. So, kneading is a homophone. It's spelled differently than this kind of knead. How do I know from the text, from this passage, that the word knead, K-N-E-A-D, doesn't mean to really want something? What clues are in this text? Question number 9. How do you know that the author is not attempting to trade yeast for money, to sell the yeast? Here's another homophone. When he explains how this unique ingredient works. Okay, so in this little paragraph, the author is going to talk about yeast, and how do I know that he's not talking about selling it, like S-E-L-L? This is where the yeast comes in. Yeast is actually a tiny living cell. Oh, there's the word, the homophone, that starts to change the flour in the dough. At the same time, yeast makes a special gas that causes the dough to rise and get bigger. The result is light, airy bread that tastes great. So you want to pick the best choice for each one of these questions. How is the information in the passage mainly organized? So how is the text put together? What is still necessary for making your own homemade bread even after reading this article? Some of these last few questions, you're probably going to want to go back to the text to look for the answers. Do not think that you just remember the text. Flip back and forth, back and forth. I was showing Grace in how to do that just yesterday. Which of the following statements would the author of Homemade Bread most likely agree? And you see that kind of question all the time in these quizzes. After having read the text, looking for the answers to these questions, I'm going to choose the best answers for each one. I might go back to the text to find the correct answer. I'm going to look for areas where I highlighted or circled things in the text. I'm going to double check my work, and then finally I will click submit and be completely done with this little assignment. Okay, let's actually read the text now and see if we can find the answers to some of these questions. Homemade bread. When I was a young boy, I watched my mother make bread. She mixed the ingredients, stirring and stirring. She pushed and prodded the dough and then let it sit for a long time before baking it. When the bread was ready, we spread jam and butter over the slices. It was delicious. Now that I am older, I bake my own bread so that I can still enjoy the kind of bread my mother used to make. I start with whole wheat flour and add water, milk, and eggs. Then I put in a little salt and just a touch of honey for sweetness. Finally, I add the yeast. In a moment, I will explain why this ingredient is so special. The next step is to mix everything until it is thick dough. Then I push and prod the dough, folding and pounding it. This is called kneading, and it helps the dough rise. After I finish kneading, I let the dough sit. This is where the yeast comes in. Yeast is actually a tiny living cell that starts to change the flour in the dough. At the same time, yeast makes a special gas that causes the dough to rise and get bigger. The result is light, airy bread that tastes great. This is a rather short article. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. You're going to want to go back and read it on your own and look for the answers to those questions, those comprehension questions, as you answer them in the little quiz for you. I hope you do well and enjoy.